Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming back to yet another episode of The Gloving Paradigm. I am your host, Peter, aka LPD8 the Buke, and this week is going to be a very fun week for me because this is a topic question that was kind of popping up on my last question that wasn't revolving around this, but since it kept coming up, I decided to cover it. And what is it that I'm going to be covering? I'm going to be covering pacing. Now, it's kind of strange that I've seen people talk about pacing like all the time, but when I asked the question, I had people literally asking me, pacing? Like, why are you even asking that? It's just, I found that strange that people were asking me, even though people have talked about it quite a bit in the gloving community, so I don't know why people are confused by me asking the question about pacing. So, I'm going to be talking about the duality that is pacing, and the reason why it's in a duality is because it goes into two different categories that help kind of bridge them together, if that makes any sense. Okay. So with that being said, let's just start out with a very simple question. What is pacing? Well, if you actually look up the definition of pacing on either Google or in a dictionary, you're going to get pretty much something talking about walking at a considerable consistent speed, blah, 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 blah. However, when it comes to gloving, this is the definition I chose. It's an action or set of actions done at an equally spaced time or manner. Okay? That's very important for you guys to understand when it comes to either timing or manner, because certain concepts don't necessarily kind of follow a beat necessarily, but there is a manner that they do follow that is consistent within terms of pacing. Okay, so the first thing I definitely want to point out is, the steps in your sequence is a form of pacing. If you're counting the number of steps you do within a sequence, like let's just say 8 steps, if you time those out equally, that's you pacing your sequence. That's pacing, right? And of course, if you also think about it, the beats in a song is considered pacing. There's another word for it called tempo, but let me get into that in a little bit. But beats in a song also set pacing. Okay, when it comes to literary writing, sentence structure sets pacing. Okay, it sets the pace of the story, whatever the case may be. So one thing I definitely want to explain when it comes to pacing is that it's not only in musicality. That's the first place that a lot of people are going to think of. Oh, pacing, you think about musicality, you follow the tempo, blah, 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 blah. Yes, on the surface level, it's very simple to go into that. But if you actually think about it in terms of storytelling, that's where things get a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. Okay, and no, I'm not talking about literary writing storytelling. As much as I am a huge fan of doing that, and I love writing stories on my own, that's not what I'm getting into. I will be referring to that so you guys can understand what I talk about when it comes to storytelling, but it is not going to necessarily fit in to gloving in part of storytelling, if that makes any sense. Okay, so first things I definitely want to talk about is the musicality portion. Since that is the most common and logical place to start, it makes total sense, right? So when it comes to musicality, the tempo is the mechanic that does set up your pacing. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you, well, you don't have to follow the tempo. As that may be true, it does set up the overall pace of the entire song. It sets up the entire pace of the show. It sets up everything, whether you are following it verbatim or not. There is a structure that you are following, and tempo is usually what that is. Now, for the people who don't know what tempo is pretty much the speed of the beats per measure. Okay, so if you hear, oh, this song is set at 100 BPMs, that's beats per measure. Okay, that usually just indicates the speed of the song. And I can't name them right off the top of my head, but there are various words, usually either in Latin or in Italian, that also dictate tempo. However, I'm not going to get into that. That's more advanced music stuff that I don't really see necessary for this right now. But to understand tempo, there are various ways to understand tempo. If you actually refer back to my episode on basic music understanding, which is episode 4, I go into great detail about how music is structured, typically in today's age. Okay, so one thing I definitely want to make people understand that when it comes to tempo, yes, it does set the entire speed of the entire song. However, artists and musicians have found ways to change the tempo within the set tempo, if that makes any sense, or make it appear that the tempo has changed. Let me explain. So, especially when it comes to EDM songs, we have two major things that happen. We have build-ups and we have breakdowns. Now, granted, yes, there are drops and bridges and interludes and things like that. However, I'm not going to get into that right now. But the thing I want to focus on is build-ups and breakdowns. Okay, so with build-ups and breakdowns, they fundamentally change the structure of how the song's been written. Usually, if you look like at a breakdown, they are taking parts out of it, breaking it down, and then build-ups are adding stuff to it, building it up. If that, simple as it can come in. Okay, these change the pacing within the set tempo. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Now let me explain. So, take a typical EDM song. It has, a kick drum at every downbeat, just the typical pacing sound of tempo. And then you want to break it down. So you remove the second and the fourth beat. All of a sudden now you're only getting the first and the third beat. That's breaking it down. When you're hearing that, your brain's going to be like, oh, that's much slower now. So now things are slowing down. However, if you understand tempo and you count as you're listening to the song and you get the tempo down and you maintain the tempo count as you're going through build-ups and breakdowns, it's still the same tempo. Everything still lines up perfectly. Okay? That's one of the most important things I always try to explain to people when it comes to, especially in musicality terms, is understanding tempo and how an artist or a musician changes up the pacing by still being in the same tempo. And build-ups and breakdowns are the typical way to go about it. Now, I can go into drops and I can go into bridges and stuff like that, but I don't really see that being necessary at this point. Okay, I think that'd be a little bit more of an advanced thing that I need to do a little bit more research on. That way I can actually break it down easier for you guys. Okay. So, that's how pacing can get changed in music without losing the tempo whatsoever. All right. Now, yes, there are key changes, there are tempo changes that musicians do. I've heard it all the time. I can point it out. If you give me a song that has it, I can most likely point it out to you as soon as I figure it out. But that's the typical norm that tends to happen with a lot of musicians. They try to stay within the same tempo because then they can break it down and build up on it and still have that structure be built throughout the entire song. Okay, it's very typical. Not all artists do it, but it is something that a lot of artists do perform. That's just how it is. Okay, now when it comes to musicality and pacing, especially as a performer such as us as Glovers, there are two things that I've talked about this time and time before. There are two major things that you need to understand and learn very quickly to help you with your musicality, especially when it comes to pacing. Okay, a great example of what I'm trying to convey here is like a singer singing on a certain key. Whatever key that they feel comfortable singing in, the band can adjust the keys to fit the singer and make it work with the singer so that way everything sits properly. Okay, same kind of concept here. When it comes to half-stepping or double timing, those are the two terms I tend to use. Half-stepping is when you actually break. The best way I describe it is half-stepping is literally taking the downbeats and like stretching it. So the first downbeat is the regular downbeat, but your second downbeat will act as a upbeat in terms of your movements. Okay, that's you slowing it down, but you're still maintaining the same tempo with the song. It appears that you're slower than the song, but you're actually not. You're still keeping up with it, so things will make sense. Now, I know some people are probably going to be like, well, if you only do things on like every third beat or every fourth beat or whatever set beat that you choose within the measure, that works too, but I'm just trying to convey what I'm talking about when it comes to half-stepping. Now, double timing is pretty much the exact opposite. So instead of making a downbeat into an upbeat, you're actually doing, making your movements in between the beats. That way you're moving a little bit faster. Because there are songs out there that are really slow. So instead of having this long drawn out, like if you're doing tutting and you're like drawing out this trace to get down to the next beat, no, you can actually use the upbeat in between those downbeats to actually get your concepts moving. It moves a little bit faster, but you're still maintaining the tempo with the song. Okay, that's what I'm trying to convey here. Now, let's move on to the much more complicated, subjective idea that pacing comes into play, and that's storytelling. Okay, now, like I said, when it comes to literary storytelling, this is how authors and writers set the pace. When it comes to being a much faster pace in terms of the story, they use shorter, much more concise sentences, thus giving an indication to the reader that things are moving with speed. If you want the pacing in a story to slow down, you have longer, drawn-out sentences with commas and words that are reflecting of introspection and thoughts and feelings and things like that from the characters, wherever the case may be. That indicates to the reader that things are slowing down. Things need to come to a slow, standstill where you can actually breathe and think about what's going on in the story. Okay, same kind of idea kind of comes into play when it comes to gloving storytelling. All right, concepts will lend to the pacing in your storytelling. Okay, whether it be liquid, tutting, clusters, digits, dials, creatures, clocks, morphing, whatever the case may be, they're going to lend to a certain pace in your storytelling. All right. And of course, if you're listening to the song is also going to help you lend to your storytelling because it also will set the tone and sets the mood, blah, 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 blah. As long as you guys understand where I'm going with this, it should be pretty simple to understand. The accentuation of your steps are also going to help with your build-ups and breakdowns within the song as well. So that's something I know a lot of people don't really sit there and think about, is like accentuating a part of your whip instead of just whipping it out really, really fast to have that trail, kind of slowing it down enough so the person can actually make out the outlines of your hands. Actually kind of does help, and it will lend to your storytelling, whatever type of story you're trying to tell. Okay, so one thing I definitely want to stress when it comes to storytelling and gloving, especially when it comes to your music choices or song choices, whatever the case may be, which way you want to put it, is the song is going to set the overall pace of the story. Just like how you write out your first chapter in a story is supposed to indicate how the overall pacing of your entire story is going to be, whether it be a fast pace or a slower pace or a nice mix in between. It's something that a lot of people try to stress in your first chapter, is to show what kind of pacing the readers are going to experience within the story overall. Okay, now, so your song choices should be the indicator to the viewer, the overall pacing of what you're going to be dealing with. Now, I know that there are certain songs out there that do the key changes, the time signature changes, and that does add a nice little layer to your whole storytelling, because to me, like, if you take a song that has a certain tempo and it has a tempo change within the song, it's like it's like starting in Act 1, moving into Act 2, and then moving into Act 3 type deal. Okay, it's one of those type of things. So understanding the song choices that you're making that's going to set your overall pacing is going to be extremely helpful. Now, a lot of people talk about only hitting a specific beat within a measure, which typically in EDM it's a 4x4, so people talk about hitting every second and fourth, or hitting every first and third, or just hitting every third. That's you as a performer shaping your pacing within the song itself. You're still following the tempo regardless, because if you're only doing like the first or third or second or fourth, or just any of the beats within the measure, every measure, you're still following the tempo. It literally, that's how it plans itself out. You're literally following the tempo that way. Okay, so how to understand pacing musicality wise is actually really simple. It's so simple. You just need to learn and understand tempo. You just need to understand how tempo sets things in place And if you refer to my episode 4 of Basic Music Understanding, you will get a much more in-depth analysis of how music is structured and how to use it in your musicality. Okay, and of course, another thing I definitely want to stress is learning to half step and double time. Again, episode 4 will help you with that. I set it up. I even talk about triplets, which I know not a whole lot of EDM songs use triplets, but I do know that dubstep uses a lot of triplets when it comes to their hi-hats and things like that. So knowing how triplets work is actually going to really bolster your musicality, because you understand a very angular type of writing in terms of music. A triplet is a very odd angular number. It's 3. It's not even like 4x4 type deal. It's a very unusual angular that you can have within a very structured, even paced type song. Okay, so understanding that is going to help, but understanding and learning how to half time or half step and double time is also going to help you with your pacing, because some songs are just really, really fast with their tempo and most people just can't keep up with that, or your concepts do not translate well at that speed. So you either need to move it a little bit faster or you need to slow it down. So learning and mastering your half stepping and your double timing is going to help. Now, another thing I will say in terms of storytelling, transitions are also going to help you set your pace, because if you look at the pacing, like in terms of storytelling, you got a beginning, middle, and end type deal. So transitioning from a very big, simple beginning into a much more complex middle, into a grand crescendo, simple ending type deal. It's also going to help you with your pacing as well, because you're understanding the overall narrative of what you're trying to do in your performances, instead of just going from one concept to another. Now, I understand when it comes to freestyle, you kind of just go off on a whim, and that's totally fine. But there are people out there that can do that and still be able to tell a wonderful story. Okay, it's an uncanny phenomenon that some people can do. I will just put it that way. So, when it comes to understanding pacing overall, there are 2 episodes I've already covered in a way that you can also learn from it. One is episode 4, which is Basic Music Understanding. That's going to help you with your musicality part. And episode 45, which is my transitional ambiguity episode. So that covers all the transition stuff and understanding transitions and what transitions are supposed to do. I have would refer to these 2 episodes for you to listen to and understand. That's going to help you with your overall pacing. But that's pretty much for all of my episode. I do know that it might sound a little convoluted and a little crazy of how I talked about when it comes to pacing, but it's one of those things that a lot of people don't understand, and I feel like people need to, we need to discuss more about pacing in terms of not only just musicality, which is pretty simple and surface level thinking in my opinion, but when it comes to storytelling and gloving, I feel like when it comes to pacing, that's something we should probably focus a little bit more on. And I know I'm probably going to do an on storytelling pacing episode soon. I don't know how soon, but I need to do a lot more research on that to help me put that into perspective. Okay. So, that is all for my episode. I do thank everybody who has listened to my episode so far. You have made it to this point. Congratulations, you have won the prize. I didn't even notice that. But I know some of you are probably going to have questions that were not covered in this episode. And how you can get in contact with me is the best way to ask me these questions so I can help you out. Of course, I do have a Facebook page, which is aptly named The Gloving Paradigm. You can always hit me up on there. I'm always on there keeping my eyes out and seeing everyone interacting with me. I try to interact with everybody who comments on my posts all the time. It's been a little crazy lately. However, I do have other outlets. I do have an email, which is muttonchopguy@gmail.com. You can hit me up there. I am on Reddit as well under the username muttonchopguy, so if you need to get in contact with me on Reddit, you can find me there under that username. And of course, I do have a Discord server, which the link to that, it will be in this episode's description. You can click on that, enter it onto the Discord server, and we can talk there. I've talked to a lot of the people on my Discord server all the time. It's great, good stuff. I find it very interesting to see what's a lot of the newer new gen type Glovers ask me Considering that I've been doing this for 10 years now, like holy crap, I just realized yesterday was my 10-year anniversary of gloving, and it's just like holy crap, I've been gloving for a whole decade. It's insane. So those are the various outlets you can hit me up at. I do highly appreciate all the people who have been liking the page so far. I do like the interaction that I've been getting from a lot of my listeners lately. It's been really, really good to see the level of engagement happening now. So I do like to thank everybody who shows support to this show. It is extremely humbling to see a lot of people paying attention and actually listening in. So thank you so much. You guys are absolutely amazing. This show would not be possible without you guys. So I love you guys, but that is all. I am your host, Peter, aka LPD Dubuque, and I'll see you guys all next week.